You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Case study!
Oh, yeah. You are listening live to a recording in the past.
Case study! We're not just talking, we're walking.
We are walking.
Walking the walk.
This is kind of like Inception, Andy, because you're currently listening, not you personally, but our listeners are listening to a live recording and something in the past that will then listen to another past recording that predates this recording for which you're listening to live, but is also recorded.
So what's the kick?
The kick?
Yeah, wasn't there some kind of explosion that brings us into the next...
so, yeah.
There it is. We're already in there. We're into the next dream. We're so deep now.
Don't turn this off.
1 second turned into 17 years. It's unbelievable.
Totally. And it leads to what the topic is about, winding the clocks back.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because oftentimes we have people to come on and talk about how they see things and are working on things.
Yep.
This episode is dedicated to a case study on how a brand looked at sustainability a little bit differently, looked at the waste that they had and were generating and how they could take that stuff, not just recycle it back into something else or to grind it up or whatever, but actually reuse it for new product.
That's right, Andy. And so what you're going to listen to now is a recording of a conversation that I had with Tracy Graham, who's Director of Product Development at Keds, and Suzie Glover, who's Design Director at Keds, about their collaboration with Ace and Jig, which is an outfit out of New York that is focused on using recycled textiles at a factory, at an operation in India, and taking in those textiles and then creating totally different upper materials. Cool, unique product on an iconic product. A Keds sneaker is iconic. It is, 100 years old or more. It is iconic. So I think that this conversation is really going to help people understand how do you get your foot in the door to don't gong me, Blake. Don't gong me.
Not yet. Wait for the kick.
Yeah, that'll take us to the next dream. How do you get your foot in the door when it comes to creating some kind of sustainable approach to an iconic company that's going to have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of legacy, but needs to do something unique and different? And I think that's what this conversation will help illuminate for our listeners.
Okay. Blake, kick us.
The brand is really remarkable. They stand for so many things in their brand values, including sustainability, but also they empower their primarily female team in India to have daycare on site at their facilities. They have water recycling programs and gardens on property that provide food for the workers at their facilities. And they go to India multiple times a year to actually spend time with their teams, empower them, teach them, and bring them into the forefront of their roles at the company.
That's cool.
So it was an easy choice for us to choose them, to work with them, and many of their values align with our own personal values. So as a brand, we are all about female empowerment, but also personally and individually interested in sustainability and bringing that into the forefront of our conversations.
That's awesome. So,
can you tell the stocking story?
Yeah.
Tell the stocking story.
How we ended up working with them really is the creative director, Holly, and I are big fans of the brand in general, and they do this really great program where they actually build their community by going to small boutiques that are owned by a lot of female business owners and creating community events with those female business owners where they invite their fans in their community into the space. They do raffles. They do swap programs where you can bring your garments in and swap them with other people to keep garments giving them new lives and giving them new opportunities to be worn by another person in a new way. And we found out they were going to be at a store near us, and we quietly stalked them and showed up at the event, gave them our business card, gave them the spiel, and they were psyched to talk to us.
That's
so
really cool.
We started a great friendship together.
And so how long from that day you were stalking them to kind of the launch of this initiative, how long did that take?
It was about 1.5 years, actually. So there were many, many conversations up front. They are so particular about their products and the way that they are built. And we were very careful and cautious going into the program with them, making sure that we were building the products to their standards, and their high quality attention to detail was really important when we were making these shoes.
Now we're talking about standards. I assume part of that is their slow fashion approach to the product. That seems to be counterintuitive in our speed to market world. We talked a lot about speed today and agility. What makes slow fashion slow in this process? And are there really no two pairs that are alike? Walk us through that whole slow fashion part.
Well, I think one of the things is, Suzie can go through the slow fashion part, but in terms of like the quick to market piece, once we got our hands on the materials, it was really, we were doing small runs of the shoes, and then we had like a key factory partner that we had to use because the materials are so delicate. We couldn't just like throw it on the production line. So we had to be very careful in how these materials were handled all the way through. We had to kind of tee it up at the factory that they had to be made in the sample room and had to be really careful. But as soon as we got the materials from them, because they are so timeless, so it doesn't really matter like if we get them this year, next year, like these shoes are awesome.
Yeah.
So we went real quick, real fast after that. Yeah. A couple trips to Asia, just a couple.
Right.
And we actually built the program in 2 different collections. One collection was utilizing their actual inline run of materials. And their approach to slow fashion is that they don't make more than they need. They are very limited in their releases, and that's purposeful so that they can encourage their community to swap the garments, to repair them with patches that they give them from the cutting room floor, to maintain that story that these textiles are handmade and should have a long life ahead of them. So our first program uses their actual yardage in an all-over type of execution. And the way that we chose these styles is that we reached out to them to find out what garments they had in production in the next run, and if there was any additional yardage that they could kind of lend to us for this. So we chose from existing lots for that. And then our second program is this really great low waste concept where we actually took pieces from their cutting room floor, had a friend of ours hand quilt them at home, and we made 25 limited pairs that are made from these really beautiful quilts of tiny little pieces from their factories. So this was really amazing to make, and certainly a development challenge. And
Again, we're still talking after this project, which I'm...
we're still friends. But this is exactly the beautiful work that they do as a company, where they encourage their community to take their scraps, make them into quilts, share the quilts, gift the quilts, donate the quilts.
Right.
They make children's clothes out of the smaller pieces that are left over, and all sorts of
the
great
tassels too. Then even so we had when we went through making these shoes, the factory pretty much used every single part of the material. So even not on these, but at retail, we have like tassels that were used with leftover materials from the scraps. So pretty much all the material was used. It was so limited in the amount of material we could have. They couldn't do as much trials as they really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So like really, we kind of wanted to take the whole Ace and Jig their approach to how they handle their textiles and really like be true and authentic to that and hold that through the whole process.
Now, did you take possession of the textiles out of India into a factory partner who was already making Keds for you in Asia? Is that how that kind of worked?
Yep, we had it. Did we have it shipped right to them, or we have it to the office?
We had the scraps shipped to us.
Right, yep.
We gave them to a friend that has a tailoring business, and she made the quilts, and then we shipped the quilts to Vietnam.
Yep. And they were already making these models for us, so they're pretty knew what they were doing, but.
We talked about it before, but some of it, right? They weren't used to the multifaceted approach to having more, different types of shoes that didn't look the same, right?
Yeah, the quality audit situation wasn't going to be a good one. We had to kind of tell them, it's okay, they're allowed to be different.
Right. Well, talk about some of the hiccups that you encountered along the way, and maybe some pleasant surprises to when you set out on this journey, what happened that you were kind of blown away by?
We certainly didn't know how to go about the hand quilted aspect when we first set out with this project. I actually took the scraps myself and sewed them at my home. And I was like, I can do this. I can sew a huge quilt and we can make a shoe out of it. No problem. But quickly realized that was a time commitment that I couldn't really give. So luckily we had a friend that could do that. But once we did send some of those samples that I had created at home to the factory, there was a new list of challenges that the factory faced with the delicacy of the materials.
Right.
And that was challenging.
When this was briefed, I was like, we're doing what? No, we're not doing this. Then my boss said we were, and I was like, okay, I guess we're doing it. But I think the trials and trying to have the factory really like be true to the material and handle it correctly was kind of like something we definitely had to work through. But I think one of the cool things that came out of it, and like Suzie said, like we didn't necessarily go to work with Ace and Jig to be the sustainable story, and it's what the panel was talking about before about the marketing and the spin and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of came out that way and was like a nice to have thing at the end. And I think it kind of like showed us that there's different ways or different approaches to sustainability. It's not just like I'm going to use a recycled lace or, I'm looking at my carbon footprints. Like from a supply chain situation, like even just to partner with people that's their values, that's what they do, that's the core of them. Right. And then it kind of like became our stuff. Like we turned into a sustainable project for us, but it wasn't really the first thing.
We learned so much from that process that we can now carry through in everything that we make after this. Yeah. It's been exciting.
Well, a wise man named Anders once said that if you stick to your iconic product and you speak to what you know, then those are things, and this seems like the perfect example of that we didn't even plan. I didn't know you'd say that, and I didn't know they would fall that way. How's the product sold? Are consumers kind of inclined to gravitate towards this kind of release? It's limited, but kind of walk us through the consumer economics behind it.
So because it was really limited, there were only a certain amount of pairs made. In that first main collection that uses the all-over inline material, there were only a few hundred pairs made. And then in that, as I mentioned before, that quilted program, we only made 25, and I think we only sold 20. A big part of this program is a seeding program that we do partner with our marketing team on and partnered close with Ace and Jig on to make sure that we got these beautiful shoes into the hands of their rich and amazing and inspiring community so that they could really spread the word and, again, bring that culture of Ace and Jig and that community of Ace and Jig to the forefront of the conversation. And then those influencers and friends of theirs were invited to an event at Nordstrom, at a Nordstrom pop-in, where the collection was debuted to the media and to the public. And at that event, they also did their really beautiful community events of bringing your garments in and swapping them and kind of sharing your garment history and story.
That's cool.
And I think the other interesting, because price kind of came up in the last conversation, and these sold for, I think we were just looking at like 120. And I mean, people paid for it. I mean, it was the whole stories, the materials. And so I think for us, for Keds, I mean, we sell, 45? I mean, our champion's $45. So it's like for us to kind of get into the space, Nordstrom's, and this price point was kind of like a test for us. And it shows that people, if you're in the right place, the right time, they are willing to take out the wallets and pay.
Have you seen it on StockX yet? I mean, have you seen it? It's so limited, right? I'm just waiting for it to pop up on StockX. Are there other things you're exploring specific to this line, or kind of what's the next step beyond this collaboration, or is it broadening this collaboration?
Again, going back to their limited release mentality, it was never their intention or our intention to blow this out in any way. We really did want to make it a beautiful moment that we spent a lot of time on and were really careful with. And I think we really succeeded in that. Yeah. So we're really happy that it was this great moment of partnership that we'll be able to look back on for many years. And I hope work with them again soon. We are still in a great relationship with them and still like loving on each other on Instagram, so that's been really awesome.
That's a sign of a deep and lasting relationship.
I was psyched to meet them because I'm just a personal fan.
That's
so
really cool.
It was really the stalking situation, but
girl fan club over here.
Yeah. But again, it's really opened our mind to how we can approach projects like this in our future. And we are working on ways to evolve this type of conversation, but keeping the conversation very authentic to what our brand values are, not just, as Tracy said, picking a recycled lace. While that's happening. Maybe that's not our real moment of marketing and storytelling, but who can we partner with and how can we partner with them to really tell that authentic ladies first story that happens to tie to a beautiful, sustainable story that everyone shares as a core value.
Right, sure.
Yeah, maybe we'll take something down the road coming in one of our core styles might be a little more sustainably made. I don't know. Wink, wink.
Are we breaking news here? Well, in that line, if a brand wants to launch a more conscious and sustainable line or product, where do they begin? Where do you begin? Something like this? Is this like a mustard seed that you can blow out of the water, or how do you guys approach it? How do you think a brand should approach it?
I mean, we've actually been talking a lot about that recently, and it's interesting again to kind of piggyback off the panel from before. But being true to our brand, being loyal to what our values are, and be authentic. We don't want to just come in and just make green champions and call it a day and check the box.
Right.
So I think we're trying to be super thoughtful in how we approach it and kind of take, like you said, like wins from this and lessons from this. I think we learned like working with our factory partners in a different way was a kind of a new thing to do, like kind of limited runs in the sample room and stuff like that. So I think that's something we're trying to kind of do in a little bit more of a mass way, but again, still in an authentic.
Man, what a great conversation. Tracy and Suzie are awesome people, and just to talk about this collaboration in front of an audience. And then the product is really cool. It's unique. It's like there's no pair of shoes that looks like another, which has its own design challenges and production challenges, but it makes for a really cool story. And I encourage people just to Google Ace and Jig, Keds, Nordstrom has them, other online outlets have them. And it's just a really cool product.
Yeah, and I think it was just fascinating to hear a live case study and then being so open to talk about how it's done, right?
Yeah.
You can do this. You have to set up a process and you do the right steps, but it's far better to try to recycle what you got into something really unique to see if you can sell it, or even generating the media around it as well to rebuild that kind of brand.
Right.
The brand awareness in a different way can be really rewarding. But we're talking about small product runs, right? We're not talking about mass consumption of these things, but it's really a thoughtful way just to go about re-looking at how you do things a little bit more thoughtful about the environment and for the consumer base as well. So that was great. I'm glad we're back out of the dream and back into the reality.
We survived.
I'm not sure. I got to spin that little thing to make sure that it doesn't stop or whatever it is, right?
The top.
All right, on behalf of Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Priest, and myself, this is the Shoe In Show. Drop us a line at shoeinshow.com if you have questions, if you have ideas on shows or guests. If you want to hear more about Inception, let us know. We will tell you all about it. Until next time, we'll see you in your dreams. Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.